Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, RAM prices are getting hot. We'll tell you why, plus the router flaw you need to know about, a pfSense disaster, then it's a big batch of your questions, our answers, and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 126 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We streamed this episode live on September 5th, 2013. This episode's brought to you by two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about both those sponsors as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris. Everybody, thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. Happy Thursday to you. I feel like it's been more. I feel like we've talked more recently than this, but it was actually me watching you live on your new show. Yeah, I watched the live stream yesterday, right? Yeah, Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesdays.
BSD Now. Alan recorded the first episode of the brand new BSD podcast with himself and his co-host Chris Moore, who has you might be familiar from the PC BSD project. He's the creator of that. And I gotta say, Alan, it looked pretty good. It was a big show. It was.
Yeah. It's like the interview, we figured, like 20 minutes. Interview went for like 45 minutes, and then show, and then the tutorial. And so we have tutorials where we're actually showing you how to do things, news segment, interviews with interesting people about interesting things, all kinds of stuff.
It's really a lot of the best stuff from TechSNAP sort of then now focused in on a BSD specifically. And you guys kind of have the approach of, not to make it sound like super like official, but it's sort of like you're attempting to also document FreeBSD and the BSD projects in new ways, right? It's kind of like...
Yeah, well, it's, the FreeBSD Foundation has talked about how they need to find new ways to get people interested and to help people learn this stuff. Because people nowadays don't necessarily want to sit there and read the manual.
Right.
And so if we can teach some of the stuff and get people started enough where they can go to the manual and just get the information they need instead of having to try to wrap their head around the concepts, if we can introduce them to the concepts and they can go from there, it'll help a lot.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll be working on the first episode and getting its intros and the RSS feeds all done Friday. So probably by end of day Pacific Friday or Saturday morning. If you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, you'll find the first episode of BSD Now posted. And I'm looking forward to future episodes. And I'm really looking forward to when you guys go to some of the conventions and things like that.
Yes,
awesome.
We'll be at, Chris will be at LinuxCon in New Orleans on the 16th or whenever that is.
Of September, yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then when is your...
We'll be back just in time to do BSD Now again that week.
Wow.
And then we'll both be going to EuroBSDCon. So the episode that week might not be live at the normal time. It might be live at a random time. Because it'll be whenever Chris and I manage to get together in Malta, which is like 8 time zones ahead. So it's all kinds of ridiculous.
Right, but otherwise the regular live time when everything is scheduled will be...
Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is 1800 UTC.
There you go.
Or 11 a.m. JB time.
Yep. And you just go to jblive.tv or also check out the bsdnow.tv website where there's additional content posted there and a live stream embed.
Notes and stuff there. I set it up because I've other Blackheim from the chat room and other people help with the show notes and stuff, so it was easier to have those somewhere where they could edit them.
Yeah.
Instead of... but you'll be able to get the episodes from Jupiter Broadcasting just like you get every other show.
Yep, and it'll be... the feeds will be there, and it'll be in the All Shows feed. I'm really excited, Alan.
Yep.
But we now have to move on to some slightly bad news. I was actually just last night talking to Ange about potentially doing some upgrades in the studio, and RAM was in the discussion, and now I sit down to do the TechSNAP program, and I find out RAM prices are going up, like big time, right?
Yes, because of a fire.
Oh, and in China at that.
Yes.
So factory fire?
So Hynix, which is one of the main companies that makes DRAM chips, they're the second largest DRAM manufacturer. Their factory in China, one of their factories in China suffered damage in a fire and has caused RAM prices to shoot up very quickly, like overnight. The factory was in Wuxi, China, and is responsible for about 40 to 50% of all of Hynix's output, and that's about 12 to 15% of all the DRAM manufactured in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the fire started at 7:50 a.m. GMT, and wasn't extinguished until 9:20 a.m. GMT. So it was over 2 hours, or almost 2 hours. And you can see in the picture there, huge billowing black smoke.
Yeah.
And it made it seem like the fire had done a lot of damage.
All that silicon burning.
Yeah, and then they said that they've suspended operations at the plant while they evaluate the damage and stuff. And so the stock market went crazy. There was only one injury during the fire. Someone was minor injuries. There was nothing serious, and nobody was killed or anything.
Good.
So that was good. And then following the news of the shutdown of the memory suppliers, all the memory suppliers have apparently stopped quoting prices because they expect the prices to be so volatile for the next while. They're not willing to guarantee a price for the next week and so on.
Wow. Yeah, it's caused the price in general, though, to skyrocket.
Yes. Well, prices had already been up quite a bit, and then this is just even more. So Reuters has a follow-up article with more from... Chris has a chart up there with the price over the last 6 months. You can see that in the beginning of the summer, the price shot way up and had been kind of trending back to getting down to normal price. And then you can see that overnight, all of a sudden, it just went straight up because of the...
Yeah.
You know, if 15% of the RAM out there isn't going to be around, then... that's going to cause the supply shortage like we saw. You know, if you see at the very beginning of the graph, the price shot way up as supply shortages started to happen. So Reuters has a follow-up article with the news from, basically the next day once they were actually able to go in there and see what was going on. So Hynix reports that the damage is not all that bad, especially compared to what was initially reported.
We're not dead yet.
The huge plumes of black smoke were caused by the fact that the fire was mostly contained in the air purification system.
Oh.
So it caused all the black smoke. And Hynix was installing new equipment, and apparently that's what was damaged in the fire. So their existing capacity isn't affected, but they were adding more capacity to be able to try to keep up with the demand that was causing the shortage in the first place. And so... we don't expect the prices to go back down, but we shouldn't expect there to be too much of a shortage because they hope to have the plant back up and running soon.
This is good news for Samsung because Samsung is their next biggest competitor.
Yeah. Well, they're the biggest competitor. So Samsung has 33% of the market share. Hynix is about 30%, and Micron is about 13%.
Okay. Yeah, so those guys are going to be making a ton of money. Wow, this
so shares in Hynix competitors rose quickly on the news, but then slackened off after when they found out that they weren't going to be closed down until they could rebuild.
Oh, wait, it's not that bad. It really is.
Well, at first, when they said they were suspending operations, and with the picture with the black smoke and the fact that the fire was going on for like 2 hours, people just assumed the whole plant burned to the ground.
Yeah,
but it didn't. So it's actually not.
It like when you look at it, it's like, oh, that's like all their stuff going up in smoke. That's not good.
Yeah. So Micron shares are up about 4% as of midday Thursday, but they had been up as much as 9%. SanDisk, which is another major competitor, although they're more on the flash side, but they make DRAM as well, their shares are up 2.3% after climbing 6% originally.
Okay. So it's not too massive.
In Hynix's comment that they issued to the press, it's currently there's no material damage to the fab equipment in the clean room. Thus, we expect to resume operations in a short period of time so that overall production and supply volume would not be materially affected. So if that's true, then they could be up and going in as little as a few days, and then it won't be. Hopefully, the prices will go back to normal.
So hold off for maybe a couple of weeks if you can on a RAM purchase.
It depends. Because of the way the supply and demand works, if the store hasn't raised the price yet, you might want to buy it, today.
That's
before
true.
they get around to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you might be better off to wait. But
I mean, I was thinking Newegg, just thinking if I was going to go grab some RAM. Newegg usually responds pretty fast, but there is that lag that sometimes you can take advantage of.
So last night probably would have been the best time, but
yeah. Well, now that we talked about it, they're going to go up it.
So DRAM chips prices have nearly doubled in the last 6 months, like we showed on that chart. The prices were starting to return to normal, but this cause them to shoot up again. And even if the plant's only down for a couple of weeks, that will provide enough of a shortage. I don't expect the prices to go back down for a little bit.
Right.
I think they'll remain artificially inflated for a while.
Probably for the rest of the year.
Maybe not quite that long. It depends.
Maybe they'll give us a Christmas present of cheap RAM.
Trending down, yeah, as you can see, it was trending down, but then it was up, rose a little bit, and they decided that was a new steady point, and it'll depend.
Kind of looks like Bitcoin. It actually looks a lot like Bitcoin right now.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So if I just buy my RAM with Bitcoin,
I bought most of my RAM at the far other side of the graph when it was even cheaper.
Did you? Yeah, good.
Bro, that's when we upgraded all of our servers to have 96 gigs of RAM.
Yeah,
it's like now we don't really need so much RAM.
I seem to have bad luck because I needed hard drives when the hard drives went way up, and remember we covered that on the show. And now here I am thinking, gosh, I could really use more RAM, 2 machines, and
I missed out. When there was a sale, I bought 2 extra hard drives for my house. But then when it came time to need more extra hard drives for the servers, the price I still had to pay. It was, not a bad price, but the regular price was a couple of weeks before when I bought some for home. I got a sale price. But
have you been seeing
a dozen more drives last week?
Have you watched the prices of SSD much? Or are you only
really? I think it seems to pretty much have steadied around $1 a gig, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I ever see a deal like I got on my SSD again, I would buy it. I got 480 gig SSD on a Black Friday sale for like $320 or something.
That's a really good deal. And
it was that's an Intel 520, which actually tends to be slightly higher priced because they're considered, one of the better brands or whatever.
All right, Alan. Any other thoughts on that story?
No, but I did just randomly think of. There's a story we don't have in the news here, but Intel was talking about making SSDs you could overclock, and they were misusing the term overclock. They're actually talking about some tunable settings in the flash control layer, where normally a flash drive is so big, but it actually is bigger than that, and they use that space to replace the dead sectors and to deal with fragmentation and the compression not always being as good. Well, where you could tune the amount of compression and the amount of reserve space and stuff to make the drive perform differently. That
sounds dangerous.
A little bit.
Like maybe you could shorten the life of the drive if you don't.
Well, yes, you could purposely decide to do that.
Yeah.
I want the speed.
I guess. Part of it is I don't have a clear indication if I should be. I still don't know if I should be trusting SSDs more than a spinning drive, because what I do know is I have spinning drives that have been running for 5+ years now, and I don't know if in 5+ years I'm going to have SSDs, especially on my machines that I run 24/7.
I have some of the original Intel 32 gig SLC SSDs that have been going since 2009 or 2010, and they're still good.
Okay.
But those are SLCs. They have 10 times the longevity of the MLCs that most SSDs are nowadays.
Yeah.
The thing I've noticed is spinning hard drives, oftentimes they kind of degrade and then die.
Right, kind of give you like a sense.
Those warning.
Yeah. That's the other thing is I've developed a sense for drive.
Sometimes there's a problem with one specific part of the drive or whatever, and you can get the data off most of it.
Yeah.
You can get most of it. With SSDs, the ones I've had that have died, it's just completely dead.
Right. And you're just SOL.
With even spinning hard drives, sometimes it's a physical thing where you can order a drive of the same, and you can pay somebody to transplant it and maybe get the data back.
Yeah.
With SSDs, it's
general. And there's tools, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in our feedback segment. There's tools that are designed specifically around that ability to just keep reading, and then move on, and then keep reading. Where when an SSD goes, there's nothing. I mean, it's not even responsive.
Exactly.
I do worry about it. But
random promo for BSD now, but we also talked a bit about NANDFS, which is having the operating system and the file system dealing directly with the flash chips instead of going through a flash translation layer that's making those flash chips appear to be a regular spinning hard drive.
See, that seems like something Apple would want, because on their new Mac Pro trash can and on their laptops, they're doing soldered in chip storage as their disk. They're not doing like SSDs that are 3.5-inch drives or whatever, 2.5-inch drives. They're doing actual chips on the motherboard. So that's a great example of where People think OS 10 is FreeBSD with a GUI on top, but that's going to come to FreeBSD and not necessarily come to Apple, and I think that's a feature they could really benefit from. It's a feature I'd love to see, too. All right, well, before we go to our next story, we got something big. We got to thank our first sponsor this week, and this is huge. So, okay, I propose a challenge to you, audience. Let's say you had the cheapest .com ever, and that was no feat. That was a major feat. That was like I thought you couldn't go any cheaper than that. How would you go cheaper? How would you go cheaper? How would you go even better?
$2.49.
How do you do that, Alan? I got a better deal for you. How about $1.99? Use the code TECH199 when you check out over at the new GoDaddy.com. Look at that. You know how you get it cheaper? You hire an action star, and he knocks the savings down even more. That is right there. That is Jean-Claude Van Damme.
At that point, you're losing so much of the sale price to the credit card processing fees.
Well, they know. Well, so here's what's a great deal too. So you get the first year for $1.99. Then you can add on additional years for just $9.99. That is still like an incredible value. Like if you were just getting the whole .com for $9.99, that's a deal. But so you get the first year for $1.99. And if it's something temporary like a wedding event or, a reunion or the holiday seasons are coming up and you want to send out like a greeting card via a blog post, something like that, get a .com for that. And if it expires in a year, it expires. But if you want to keep it for several years, you're doing a project, maybe you're getting yourself something that's going to be around for a while, $9.99 for additional years is a fantastic deal. First of all, I'm a big Jean-Claude fan just because I loved watching 80s action movies with my dad. So I feel like they've targeted this at like my generation because I grew up there watching him. They have a new commercial out that Jean-Claude's in, and I was like what, really? A Jean-Claude commercial? Then I watched it. It is hilariously perfect. It is so like...
It's still GoDaddy, just, they've...
You got to watch it. It's so great.
Yeah.
There's flames on that.
Time.
It's go time.
It's go time. GoDaddy.
GoDaddy's got a lot of cool stuff coming out. This is just the beginning of a big rollout of a lot of stuff. It's really exciting. And if you go over there, it's go time at GoDaddy.com, and Jean-Claude's there kicking out the savings. Look at that. That man can kick out savings at $1.99.com when you use the code TECH199 over at the new clean GoDaddy. We've got a link on our show notes. It'll pre-arm your shopping session with our code. That way the TechSNAP program gets credit. Go get yourself a .com for $1.99. Who knows how long that great deal is going to be around? And I mean, if you've been around the web for a while, you've never seen anything like that. And GoDaddy is kicking it. Look at that. Yep. New clean GoDaddy. I love it. I like it. It's real nice. So thanks to everybody who supports our sponsors by then supporting our show. And we appreciate that. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Alan. Well, I don't know how we're going to top that. That's Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I feel like that's the peak of the show today. Kind of exciting.
Sure.
But...
Action-packed.
We must move on. Amazon doesn't have Jean-Claude Van Damme on their side, but they are working with the CIA, and that means jobs, right, Alan?
Yep. So Amazon is looking to hire about 100 IT staff who will be eligible to get top security clearance to work on the CIA's private Amazon cloud.
Okay.
So we had talked about this before. Amazon and IBM had been bidding to build the private cloud for the CIA, and Amazon won, but then IBM filed a lawsuit saying that it was unfair. And IBM won that lawsuit, and so the government's looking at restarting the bidding process and doing it over again. So to make sure they're ready for that, Amazon is starting the recruiting drive. Job openings include software developers, operation managers, cloud support engineers, which is their way of saying sysadmin, and a bunch of other positions.
I hate all these buzzwords.
Yes, cloud support engineer.
Honestly, I've checked out since blog. Since blog came along, I checked out. I hate all of them.
Yeah, especially the cloud. And actually, the cloud is actually at the core of, like, the argument over what the definition of it is at the core of this entire argument between IBM and Amazon.
Ugh.
So back to the jobs for a second. The candidates must meet all the requirements to get a U.S. top security clearance, top secret clearance, and that includes passing a federally administered polygraph exam.
Okay.
They don't really want another Snowden.
Yeah.
So Amazon's hiring efforts include an invitation-only recruiting event for system support engineers at the Herndon, Virginia facility, September 24th and 25th. Well, they did that wrong because that overlaps with EuroBSDCon, so nobody good is going to show up.
Right. Those people probably wouldn't pass the screening process. Remember, they don't want brilliant people.
Oh, yes. I remember from last week.
Right.
So in their filings, Amazon is claiming that it's uniquely qualified to deliver cloud computing. Well, independent analysts that made the report for the government responded by saying that cloud computing simply describes one approach to data center asset provisioning, one that's been around and been practiced by vendors like IBM for many years. And it's true. It's like the cloud isn't anything special or new. It's just a marketing label stuck on virtualization.
Well, so earlier on in the industry, before cloud came along, we tried hosted Exchange, hosted web, hosted intranet.
Right, and that just technically meant that instead of having Exchange be on a server at your headquarters, it was on a server somewhere else on the internet.
Which is really...
And then, so the cloud just mostly became to mean being able to deploy a server instantly because it's virtual instead of real hardware.
Right, but then Gmail became
even like
the cloud.
Hosted Exchange was just, somebody would have to set up a server and put Exchange on it at the data center somewhere else.
Yep.
So the cloud's advantage was you could deploy the servers instantly because there wasn't actually this physical act of putting a server together, putting it in a rack, installing the OS and everything.
It came down to, hey, look, we've made a great web UI to deploy this for you.
Right.
But then it moved from that, and that was really EC2, Rackspace, right? A lot of them were pushing that. The VPS providers started popping up, and then we got to any application that's in the cloud, anything that is of a certain JavaScript complexity,
internet, basically.
Right. If it's on the internet, it uses JavaScript and HTML. You can consider it a cloud application, and you just put it up there, and it's
it doesn't have
app.
to use JavaScript and HTML, really.
I suppose not. It seems like that tends to be the line.
That's one definition. But on any network diagram, the internet was always represented by this cloud because you couldn't draw the entire internet.
Yes.
Although you can actually, Pier 1 has done it, and it's actually the background picture for my Google Plus page.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about it a couple months ago, at least that. But anyway, the cloud just meant, putting your data on the internet instead of on your hard drive or whatever. And it's not really what it means. It's, basically this term has been overloaded to mean many different things to many different people.
Well, yeah.
And that is a problem.
It also, now just as a tangent, I really am not happy with now the rampant use of the term cyber. Cyber has, calling something cyberspace was like the wacky, quaint thing that movies that got it wrong did. And then now all of a sudden we have cyber war, we have persistent cyber threats, we have cyber attack, we have all of this cyber terrorism. I mean, give me a break, right? It means it's ridiculous. All of this they take these terms, and then these terms can mean cyber, cloud. They can all mean like 15 different things. So this is where the battle between Amazon and IBM lies. Yeah.
Well, because remember what cybernetics meant, like robotics. It didn't necessarily have anything to do with the internet. They really abused the word.
Yeah. All right, so where does that leave us in the story?
So originally, the government accepted Amazon's bid, which was $148 million, over the IBM bid, which was only $93 million. Part of the problem here was that the way the government phrased a bunch of things in the request for proposals, they had these very vague and made-up examples and stuff, and basically they worded things so badly that the different people that bid on the contract estimated completely different things. And so you couldn't even compare the prices between the two contracts because they were not actually contracts to do the same thing. Because the outline in the request for proposals that CIA wrote was so vague that everybody built something entirely different to solve to answer the request.
I would propose to you, I mean, I don't know, I suppose it truly depends on the implementation. wouldn't you think the CIA would want to own and control from top to bottom their infrastructure? I mean, that seems like kind of like...
Well, as we've seen, they mostly rely on contractors for everything.
Yeah. This doesn't
They
seem
don't
like...
own anything.
It seems like a potential source for leaks. It seems like a potential source for not being able to have the system as flexible as you want, therefore limiting its capabilities. Maybe this is a stopgap until they can build their own data center NSA style.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and a quote here from the analyst, the vendors were required to address hypothetical scenarios. In one instance, it involved the processing of 100 terabytes of data. Well, what does processing mean? Right? Is that literally just mean storing it all in something like Amazon S3 so it's redundant? Or does it actually mean like doing something to it and doing what to it?
Is it video footage? Is it text files? Is it phone calls?
What are you doing to it?
Is it audio?
How long do you need, how quickly do you need to be able to do it? Is it 100 terabytes of data a day?
Right.
But the scenarios were ambiguous and the vendor priced it in completely different ways, making it impossible to compare the bids. And so they just picked Amazon. The analyst also said that the CIA too casually brushed off Amazon's outage history when considering Amazon's bid.
Well, that's true, but this is going to be a separate infrastructure.
Right, but it may be susceptible to the same problem.
I feel like a lot of this is like IBM just bitter that, I mean, because let's all be honest here, what IBM makes their money off is selling these monstrous systems to the government. That's what that's their business. So, of course, they're a little
And Amazon wants to horn in on that.
Yeah.
Amazon's also extended its effort to get different government cloud work. They've already got a bunch of other government agencies like Justice Department and Agriculture and a bunch of other ones. But Amazon's been certified by the U.S. under its Federal Risk and Authorization Program called FedRAMP. So they've been like certified that there's not a huge risk in using Amazon, and I'm not sure.
Certified a team player, Amazon.com. Working with the federal government to make life better.
Sounds like a propaganda commercial to me.
Well, I'm going to go order something using my Amazon Prime account right now. Funnel some more money into that machine, right, Al? Why not? And I can't help it. I love Amazon. And, from their standpoint, this, it is a huge opportunity because there is so much money to be made now off of how many companies get to come up with this huge, infrastructure to support their business and then figure out a way to turn that into a business itself. I mean, it really is pretty brilliant what they've done here. You got to be pretty impressed by it. I wish I could think of something that clever. Like, hey, I need to build this so I can sell books. Oh, I think I'm going to sell other things. Now I'm selling everything. And holy crap, I have this worldwide infrastructure. Let's lease it out. I mean,
Right, well, because they've done that more than once, right? Because they have Amazon fulfillment. It's you can sell stuff from your own store and have Amazon just run the warehouse for you and ship the stuff for you.
Yeah.
And nobody even never knows that Amazon's involved, right? They have various different permutations of it where you can, where it's, you sell it on Amazon.com, but it's shipped by Amazon or whatever. But you can get right to the point where you're just outsourcing the warehouse part of it to Amazon because Amazon has robots and systems, and they're really good at warehouse stuff.
And do you know, are the boxes branded? Do you know? Are they branded? Because the Amazon boxes always have the logo on it, but I don't know.
I think they would use non-branded boxes if you wanted or something.
They're an interesting beast. So any other thoughts on that story?
I don't.
Okay. So it sounds like it's going to go ahead now that they're hiring. I mean, the fact that we got the go-ahead. We saw that they had the green light to go ahead, but...
Well, I don't know if with IBM winning its lawsuit, it depends on...
Did you notice where the jobs are going to be at either? Because Amazon's based here in my state.
Right, but the recruiting event is in Virginia, right? Because that's next to Washington, D.C., so I'm guessing it'll be,
Yeah. So jobs
in their data center there. Well, because, Amazon AWS's main data center is actually in Virginia, right? Their U.S. East.
Well, that's convenient.
They don't actually have a data center in Seattle. They have one in Oregon, but it was actually opened much later for Amazon AWS.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I still have to pay sales tax on everything I buy from Amazon because they're in my state.
Yep.
All right.
I used to like buying from NCIX because instead of a local store here because I only paid federal sales tax, not provincial, but they're in BC, so it's now harmonized sales tax, so I pay it anyway.
All right, well, before we go to our next story, which I'm going to scroll ahead here. Oh, we were just talking about that the other day. Interesting. All right, well, before we go to that story, I want to thank our second sponsor this week, and that is Ting.com. Go to TechSNAP.Ting.com to start saving right now. Now, what is Ting? Well, Ting is mobile that makes sense, my mobile service provider, and some fine folks from the Canadian regions, just like our host, Alan here. Now, Ting is an MVNO of Sprint, so if you've got good Sprint service in your area, you're going to get fantastic Ting service. No contracts, no early termination fees, and if you go to TechSNAP.ting.com, they've got a new landing page. It's going to get you set up right away. First of all, I'd very much like to recommend you plug in the How Much Will You Save wizard here. Average Ting bill is $21 a month, so let's start there. And that bill is going to include hotspot and tethering. Nothing's going to be snuck into that bill. There's no add-on services, no mysterious line items, and you have unlimited devices. You just pay $6 per line, and then you only pay for what you use. So if you don't use your phone very much, you don't pay very much. And if you use your phone a lot, no big deal. Ting has fantastic rates. They just add up what you use at the end of the month for your minutes, your text, and your megabytes, and then bill you for the bucket you fall into. So, for example, because I do very little phone use, but I do about a gig a month. That puts my bill usually at just below $30. And if you go to TechSNAP.ting.com, your first month, you're going to take $25 off your bill. Well, so do the math on that. If the average Ting bill is $22 a month, then we're going to take $25 off. That's a really good deal. So use their savings calculator, plug in what you get, and then be impressed by that. And I'd also like to point you over to something else. If you're looking at the Ting phones, all unlocked phones, look at the Sell Yours option over here. You might consider this if you've got a used device. Ting will help you make a few bucks on your old phone, and they'll help you move over to Ting. And they use Glide to do that, and Ting has a little wizard right here on their site. You plug into that, and they'll help you sell your old device and recycle it for you as well. So that's a really nice option. Yeah, Ting's got. They've also got the if you want to buy a used device, they've got the Ting personal shopper service for you. They'll go out and locate a compatible Ting device and then contact you when they have found that. And, of course, on their new devices, they have all the great latest phones. They've got the new Samsung S4 Purple, and they've also got the S4 Black, and my favorite, the HTC One Black. Look at that beautiful phone right there. I love my HTC One. So go to TechSNAP.ting.com and start saving right the heck now. Ting is absolutely fantastic. Been using them since the beginning of 2013. I can't even believe how much money I'm saving. I absolutely love it, and they got some great devices. And, of course, Ting has fantastic customer service. You can call 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and a real person, that's East Coast, a real person will answer the phone, and they'll actually fix your problem.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy considering no other phone company will do that.
Oh, yeah, isn't that weird? A phone company is a phone company's going to answer the phone. That's strange, I know. And they also have great forms.
Yes.
So don't forget, people love Ting, and your people. So go to TechSNAP.ting.com. And thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
For sure.
Okay, Alan, so we talked about these router kits. How do you pronounce them again?
MikroTik.
MikroTik, that's right, Tik. But now it sounds like there might be a little security issue, correct? Tell me what's going on.
Yes. So King Cope, who's a security researcher who we've talked about a couple times before, actually, because he found vulnerabilities in MySQL and stuff. He found vulnerability in the MikroTik router OS's SSH daemon.
Oh, okay.
So MikroTik routers version 5 and 6 use ROS SSH rather than OpenSSH. And because of that, not because of that. And the particular one they're using is vulnerable to a remote pre-authorization heap corruption. So before you log in, you can corrupt the memory heap of the SSH server, and then sometimes means you can get in without logging in. Shodan HQ, which is a search engine for devices and services on the internet, a search there reveals that there are about 300,000 devices running ROS SSH. And if all of those would be vulnerable to this and could be rooted, that's quite a number of devices. So yeah, there's also an undocumented built-in user account called devel, as in developer. It uses the same password as the admin account, but it's only activated if the file /etc/devel-login exists. But that might be part of the reason why they're using a non-standard SSH daemon, is so that they can do weird things like having a second username that uses the
Why would
admin
that
password.
be there? I mean, it's open source, so people, it's not like
What's open source?
Isn't the whole thing open source?
I'm not sure. I don't think MikroTiks are. No, I think they're a commercial product.
Oh. Well, that changes the equation a little bit, doesn't it?
Right. But basically, the developer account's only enabled if this file exists, and it doesn't by default, right? It's fairly well secured. But anyway, in his development kit, King Cope he modified a version of the ISO to have that file enabled by default, and have it still match the signature they use to check to make sure the firmware hasn't been modified. So that was interesting in and of itself. But anyway, he shows that if you try to log in, and then he uses a little inline Perl script to set the username to just the letter A 100,000 times, it crashes the SSH daemon. And so if you inject malicious code in there, because you're corrupting the heap, then you can gain access. And so if you successfully exploit this vulnerability, you would get full access to the router device, which has a BusyBox shell on it.
Then you could have, and the SSH is running as root?
Obviously.
So you would have root access with a shell.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
And, we covered this, I think.
And he has, ridiculous amount of detail that's over my head in the article if you want to read about it.
I think we were talking about this, was it last week or the week before? Must have been last week, because we got a series of emails that said, hey, thanks for mentioning MikroTik, because it's really great. And it doesn't get enough attention.
I know a number of people that are quite in love with them.
It's bigger than I realized.
We mentioned shooting Ethernet cables between apartment buildings with crossbows in Latvia.
Right. And for training purposes, too. But yeah, that's right.
Yes. It was,
somebody wanted for experimentation. Cool. Well, so there you go. A little update. They're more popular than I realized. And you said 300,000 they had detected?
Yeah, there are 300,000 that have SSH exposed to the internet.
Oh.
And that's just the one that Shodan found.
And that's 300,000 they scanned, and they're just there. And
they report a version number that would appear to be vulnerable. It's not clear whether if all 300,000 would be vulnerable or not.
Yeah, I'm looking. It doesn't say. Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, now before we get to the feedback, I just got a quick little mention to make. We just pushed out new updates to the Jupiter Broadcasting extensions. Now, if you remember, down at the bottom of Jupiter Broadcasting, we have some affiliate links that if you click on those bad boys at the bottom of our site, way down there, you can't quite see it on the screen. If you click on those bad mamma jammas, then your shopping session will get tagged. And that tag then donates a portion of your overall purchase, to the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. We have Chrome and Firefox extensions. These extensions just automatically tag it for not only the sites we have listed down there, but now even more sites. For example, Woot.com has been added recently. We have improvements for Audible.com. And we just pushed out new updates. Now, the reason why this is important is because we're trying to be a good citizen. So what's happened is all these extensions are open source projects, and other people are using them for their churches and stuff. And so we're kind of getting different suggestions and things, and we want to make sure that people are using them are all good citizens. So one of the things we've implemented in the new extension is it'll always tag your shopping session for Jupiter Broadcasting unless you click somebody else's link, intentionally, you want to support somebody else for a shopping session. Now the extension will automatically recognize that and behave correctly and say, okay, you'll use theirs. And
so it'll tag an untagged session, but it won't overwrite an existing tag.
Thank you. Much easier, much simpler said. However, to do that, we had to push out an update. And you have to, on Chrome at least, I'm not positive about Firefox, you have to re-enable it. So if you have our extension, you have to turn it back on because it auto-updates. And because it's having to detect that, you have to grant it the permissions. And then in Firefox, we've done some integration improvements, so that's out, and it's even better. Woot.com, though, was a big one. And there was another site we just added. Monoprice is in there, and we've done some improvements for Monoprice, too, which is not linked to the bottom of the site. Yeah, I know, I love Monoprice. So lots of good stuff. So if you have the extensions, check
my house is wired together with 2 boxes I bought from...
Dude, the studio. There's a lot of the studio. I've had a few actual Monoprice cables, but for the most part, very good. So if you have our extension, make sure it's enabled. You have to turn it back on Chrome at least, and you might have to in Firefox. And if you don't have it yet, please consider grabbing either the Firefox or Chrome extension. You can find them linked at the very bottom of every Jupiter Broadcasting page. This is how we sort of keep our baseline costs. This keeps the lights on at the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, keeps our bandwidth bills paid, and a lot of times, because a lot of that revenue goes into Amazon accounts, I use them to buy supplies for the studio, like, for example, a set of 4 lights I just purchased using some of that money. So I very much appreciate it, and it helps us pay our costs and keeps things on an even keel. So you can go grab those at the bottom of our site, and if you have it, please make sure it is enabled. But Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, our first email comes from Brad this week, and it's about FreeBSD 10. Have a listen.
Yes.
He says, with FreeBSD 10's removal of the GNU tools, do you ever see a future Linux distributions following suit? Would Debian ever do it, Red Hat? I know there's a lot of Linux distributions that have a history with GNU, to the point that Stallman will only call it GNU/Linux, but if GNU is removed, what would he call it? On top of that, are the LLVM tools much better than the GNU ones, and should current Linux users switch to Clang instead of GCC, for example? Your thoughts, Alan?
A couple things. On FreeBSD, there's only a few things from GNU that are in there, like GCC and until recently, the patch command was the GNU one, although that's been replaced with the BSD one. That was one of the news articles on BSD Now yesterday. It wouldn't really be possible. If you removed the GNU stuff from a Linux distribution, there wouldn't be any commands left.
Right. And you
Like,
have...
On Linux, GNU is ls,
It's
top,
everything,
copy, move, tar. Everything is GNU.
Yeah.
Like the entire user land.
And the entire...
I guess like you'd have the kernel and there would be no commands.
Well, and think about like all the distributions that are based around GPL licensing, and I mean, there's so many things, and it is
like even if you look at projects like Debian KFreeBSD, that's replacing the Linux kernel with the FreeBSD kernel and keeping the whole GNU user land.
Right. Well, and then you also have to remember some people prefer the GNU user land, some people don't, some people do, but it's so there's that element. I mean, there'd be user revolts. Like it was the Dark Ages. There's one thing: torches, pitchforks, everything. But also these distros and these companies, they've based their entire model around distributing GPL software. And in fact, there's a lot of distributions out there that won't even touch it unless it's GPL code. So no, that's not happening anytime ever.
But at the same time, from FreeBSD's perspective, we have the opposite thing. GPL v2 was fine. We were perfectly happy to keep doing that. But when the GPL v3 came out, that was just untenable. It has clauses that are specifically exactly the opposite of what FreeBSD wants and what FreeBSD users and customers want. So they basically, FreeBSD has been stuck with a version of GCC from 2007, which is the last one under the GPL v2. So either we had to keep patching and developing our own fork of GCC or switch to Clang. And so switching to Clang was a much better solution.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. So next email came in from Rob. It says, his subject line was pfSense went down in flames. For a firewall, you'd think the few flames wouldn't be a big deal. You'd think you can help me patch this S? Going a little over 5 months of continuous uninterrupted uptime, pfSense finally failed me. I'd lost both my T-shirts, too. The humanity. If you look close, the blades on the CPU fan have dropped like a lope-eared bunny. There are 3 computers in the wide shot, and he also mentions that some of the hard drives still work. But in my hotel, he said, with spotty Wi-Fi, I thought I'd try to share some of this with you. He doesn't have a connection at home anymore. FYI, he says, by the way, some of you guys might note this too, his PayPal subscription got automatically canceled. PayPal does this, and he had to go re-enable it.
Almost
annoying.
Every time if you change your credit card, they do that.
Or address.
It's mostly because they don't want a bill to continue when you thought it might not.
All right, Alan, are you ready for the
a little
horde?
Goofy. It can be a problem for me.
He included a batch of pictures, and he had he had a firewall, and he had his
pictures.
shirts on top of it, and the shirts, his Patcher S shirts.
It's like melted plastic and singe marks. And
Oh my God, that freaks me out. That could happen to me. I have a lot of machines that run 24/7.
So do I.
Oh wow.
Well, it doesn't say what caused the fire.
That must have smelled so bad.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's horrible. So for your audio listeners, his room is just destroyed.
It's like the plastic on the case is all just melted and dripping and looks like black lava.
Oh my God. Well, geez. Yeah, he didn't mention, Rob, you didn't mention what caused it.
Yeah, it seems like he had a house
did the
fire.
computer cause it?
The computer, I don't think so.
Yeah.
The computer shouldn't be able to do that.
Rob, email Angela at jupiterbroadcasting.com your address. We might have and your shirt size. We might have 1 or 2 left. I don't know. Maybe we'll send one.
I was just thinking that, I should have bought a bunch more shirts.
I mean, I got 2.
I thought when I bought like 8 or 10 shirts that I was going overboard, but I really should have had that box full of T-shirts.
Yeah, I bought 2. But I'd send him, if he's in, I think I got extra large, I'd send him one. I feel that looks horrible. And nobody should lose their TechSNAP 100 shirts. Those are limited time collector's editions.
I know, and I'm like, well, I wish I had some to give to a couple people.
I know. It's like we don't do 100. We can't do 100 again. Now we got to wait to 200. We're on our way, though.
We'll be at 150 again soon enough.
That's true. We could do it for 150 because I could use you know what? We should
That'll
do
be
it.
a year after the last one, so that'll be
We should
fine.
do it seasonally, so that way we can get sweatshirts. Because I would like a sweatshirt for the winter.
Yeah. It could be if we laid it out so that they would be shipping at like the beginning of December, it'd be like perfect Christmas gift.
That is true. What would we say on a Christmas TechSNAP shirt, though?
I don't know.
Could just be the same exact shirt, but put a
Ho, ho,
Christmas
ho,
hat on
Merry
you.
TechSNAP.
Like a black and white Christmas shirt, and just says, without ho ho underneath it or something. Ho ho, patch your. Actually, Christmas time is the best time to give patch your S shirts out because you need to tell people to patch all over the holidays. The time you can
That
get
reminds me of not this year, I don't think, but the year before when FreeBSD had like 3 critical security vulnerabilities on Christmas Day.
Yeah, that was
Right?
funny.
Colin Percival was like, ho, ho, Merry Christmas.
All right, so we have a follow-up email from T to the Z. Remember he wrote in last week about his private IP leaking?
Yes.
He says, hi, guys, regarding my email last week about canyouseeme.org showing my private IP. Alan nailed it. I was running behind Squid and Squid Guard. Thank you for pointing me in that direction. I'll see what I can find. Thanks again. Really love the awesome show. So, a little exercise for you
basically
guys
what
at home.
happens there is Squid is sending a header called X forwarded for where Squid is telling the website the IP address of the person that's going through the proxy. And it's basically the proxy's attempt to stop you from, so that the website can do things like if they're geolocating you, they can figure out where you're actually coming from. Although you probably might not want it to leak your internal IPs. I think there's a setting in Squid where you can say don't do
That
this if
seems
the
odd,
IP
right?
is in this range. It's not that odd. It's normal.
Why would you want to give out the 192 though? I mean, that doesn't do that. They can't use that for geolocation. They can't
Right.
send anything to that. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just the default to send the client's IP address when they're behind a proxy. It's a requirement of the HTTP RFC, right? So if you're a proxy, you have to send the IP address of the person who you're making the request on the behalf of. But it's up to and it's kind of funny that the websites return that IP address when most people going to what is my IP address want to know the external one, not the internal one.
Yeah, that is funny.
But it explains the inconsistent results between the sites. Some of them are silly.
Yeah, some of them are detecting it, some of them are.
Or some of them, it might be that web servers also do this when there's a reverse proxy. So when there's, for example, on the CDN, when your request comes in, it hits one of our cache servers. And if the request is like a post or something, it gets passed through to the backend servers. And those backend servers want to know the IP address of the original user, not of our edge server. So we have an IP, or a header that says, the person's real IP was this. But we have a list saying only accept that header if it comes from one of these IP addresses. So some third-party person can't connect directly to our backend and spoof who they are.
Right.
Saying, I'm connecting with this IP, but actually make it look like I'm connecting from 192.168 something so that I'll be allowed into something I'm not supposed to be.
All right. So there you go.
So that can explain it as well. Like the website, as far as the PHP script or whatever they're running on the what is my IP address website, it might actually think that that's the real IP address, not the proxy forwarded for, because of some reverse proxy in front that has a broken trust system.
Next question comes in from GWOOM in the IRC subreddit, and he has a question about hard drive diagnostics. He says, I've built myself a small home server with 9 hard drives. When I boot up FreeNAS from a USB booting process, it shows error message from one of the drives, and then it stalls. I guess my next step will be to remove one drive after another until I find the faulty drive and proceed without it. But it got me thinking, what programs or scripts can I use to check the health of my drives before I install them on my machine? I really don't want to pay $90 for SpinRite unless there's some other program I can use. Truth be told, I'd probably just put more drives untested instead of buying that program. Now, I had the same problem.
Couple things. First thing is he didn't include the error message, so I can't help him.
So let's go with mine. So I was getting essentially, because it was in an eSATA array, I think maybe there was less details to the OS, but it was just essentially the drive would time out. Oh, can't, drive time out.
Right. So, but you would get a device name like ADA7 or something.
Yeah. But
if it works, you can do smart CTL, SmartMon tools on the drive, and it'll tell you the serial number. And that way you can look at physical drives and match. I've actually seen a lot of people started now when they're installing a bunch of disks in a RAID array. You know how normally you label them?
Put the serial number on the front.
Put the drive serial number on the little label strip on the hotspot bay. So that way when a drive fails, you don't want to rely on using Smart CTL at that point. So when they add drives to the array, they this drive matches up to this one.
I gotta start doing that.
The
'Cause,
operating
I don't
system.
have. So right now, I don't know which drive is 88, whatever. I have no idea what drive is which. They're just all in the array. And when I had one pop, it was like I just sat there and went through one at a freaking time to find it, and it was very nerve-wracking because it's not. You don't like popping drives in and out of your array, and
Exactly, because if two get disconnected at once, you can end up crashing things. And
So, do you have any tools that you use to beat a drive before you put it into production?
I generally don't do that because it might wear out a drive that was going to work fine anyway.
Yeah.
Generally, I'm using Z2 or bigger so that a failed drive's not going to be an issue, and so I just throw it in there. And
Is there any kind of ZFS testing, like a low-level format that exercises a drive or something like that?
I noticed that most of my dedicated server providers will do a smart long test, which usually takes about 4 to 6 hours.
And how does a ZFS scrub play into this?
A scrub reads back data that was on the disk. So if you create an empty array and do a scrub, the scrub will take like 5 minutes because there's nothing written to the array yet.
But if you had a full array and you ran routine scrubs on it, that might trigger.
It reads every sector and it will report read errors and correct them.
So that would probably give you an early indication of a drive having
And then when you
issues.
do Z-pull status, you'll see all your drives in a list of how many errors each one has had.
Yeah.
And it should all be zeros, but if one's got a number that keeps going up, you know something's bad.
So Z-pool status will kind of keep an eye on the error counts. Keep an eye on that. And you kind of get an idea if something's been reporting errors. Like, for example, in FreeNAS, it auto-schedules a scrub. So you just go and check Z-pool status from time to time.
Yeah,
And because FreeNAS is
it's
already doing
recommended you do one at least once a quarter, possibly even more often, like once a month. Although there's a performance impact while the scrub is running, because it's reading from the disk all the time.
Yeah.
You know, the disk, your read and write rates won't be as nice.
Right. Whoa, look at that. What did you just put in there? Oh, that's your...
I just pasted the output, and you see that I have 0 read, 0 write, and 0 checksum errors on each of my disks.
Yeah. So that's how you go. Somebody kick that guy. No, I'm kidding.
And you probably haven't noticed, but when BSD Now comes out, you'll notice in the frame graphic around us, like on this show, there's the blue one. The red one actually has the output of the Z-full status command as the random console.
Oh, cool.
In the images.
You geek. That's a perfect one.
That was Cheese Bacon did that, Adam.
All right, so...
But yeah, I'd be interested to know the exact error message he was getting with the FreeNAS, because that can help diagnose stuff. But yeah, in general, if you can use SmartCTL to find the serial number of the particular drive that's bad, then you can easily figure out which one to pop.
There you go.
And then other things... Sometimes if you just do DD and just read from the drive consistently and look for the drive whose light's blinking like crazy, although it depends. It sounds like you might not be having a hot swap array where you're not going to have an individual light for each disk to be able to isolate one that way.
So, if you really care, I mean, I bought SpinRite years ago, and Gibson is, good about, first of all, there hasn't been an update in years, but he's working on an update right now. He's going to give it to existing owners. Here's what I do, and the reason why I did it is when I was checking a lot of drives, I just set a machine up with SpinRite running off of I think it was either a CD or something. And I just plugged machines into it, and I just had a dedicated SpinRite rig for a while because I had a spare computer, and they would just scan it. For me, $80 was worth it. I understand if you don't want to spend that. There are other tools, and I want to point him and we'll have another guy that wrote in. Both of these, I want to point them to the Linux Drive Recovery episode, Season 27, Episode 10 of LAS. There's a bunch of open source tools, including some live CD tools, that are designed for drive testing. Go watch that episode. We'll have it linked in the show notes. And I'll give you some more things to poke at.
And just randomly, Drive Savers, who's popular for getting back data off drives, actually supports ZFS now.
Yeah.
In case you do somehow manage to do something evil to your ZFS array.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Because actually some person I know did something kind of like you did, I think, where they had a nice RAID Z array and they accidentally added a mirror of 2 drives to it, and then they can't detach that anymore. And then they tried to forcibly detach it and cause some problems, and the pool was never importable after that. And so they went to Drive Savers to get their data back off of it.
Oh, wow. Jeez. So it went bad on them. Yikes.
Well, it was their own fault because they kept poking it and breaking it. But knowing that it's actually possible, that there's a company out there that actually can recover ZFS data is good to know.
All right. So our next post on the subreddit comes from
something where I think ButterFS doesn't have that yet.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you're right. Martin Jester 2 writes, I'm interested in setting up my own private certificate authority, just for testing and learning at this time, mostly just for HTTPS and SMTP traffic. I'd be interested in a segment going over the process to explain how to do this. If anyone has specific experience setting up or administering this type of setup, that'd be useful too. He says, so, he wants to just play with certs, but he wants to know about generating his own. Do you have any pointers?
Yeah, if you have OpenSSL, which I'm sure you do, there's a Perl script that comes with it called ca.pl that does it.
Yeah, in fact, if you just type it in and just hit tab, it'll give you the commands you need to write, and you can see how you can set the key length and all that kind of stuff right there.
Yeah, so there's a Perl script that does it. A lot of apps have it built, like Puppet that I use. It has its own certificate authority built in. But yes, I've run my own certificate authority before. Actually, I run the one for GeekShed. We sign certificates for the servers, and rather than having a password, the administrators of GeekShed have to log into IRC with an SSL certificate over an SSL connection and use basically a private key instead of a password to authenticate because it's stronger than a password.
And we have a link to the Arch Wiki provided by, Daring GI. How do you suppose you say that one, Alan? Dargini? Yeah. If you're on a Linux machine, this Arch Wiki will walk you through doing it, even if you're not on Arch. It's a very good document.
And it's mostly just OpenSSL, so it'll be the same on FreeBSD as well.
Yeah, I would think so. All right, I will add the notes.
There's a ca.pl script, a Perl script included with OpenSSL that includes all the tools you need to manage a little homegrown certificate authority. If you mean something bigger, like actually issuing certificates to other people rather than just my own little farm of servers at home or something, then you're looking at buying something commercial probably and getting an HSM and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, well, we were just talking about data recovery services, so this email kind of fits. It comes in from Joe. He says, I'm considering starting a side business doing data recovery for individuals and small businesses in my area. I'm already pretty comfortable using tools like TestDisk, PhotoRec, and DD. I've used a few bash scripts that help with sifting noise out, and I end up with a giant batch of junk where I'm looking for something specific. I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1. What would you recommend as a good tool chain or workflow, hardware or software related? And I'd like to set up a flash stick with all necessary tools and have it be non-static so I can modify scripts and modify an environment without having to image the flash drive all the time. USB, when USB works best, or at least. I'm concerned with some legal aspects. This is number 2. I know you can't really give legal advice, but maybe you can offer generalities about what to do if I accidentally stumble across something clearly illegal. Not that I would look for it, and not that I know statistically something finding like that where I'm looking. I know that statistically finding something there while I'm looking for more normal files is really unlikely. I guess there's disclaimers I should use and resources I should read as well. So any pointers on getting involved in data recovery?
I've heard of like computer stores and stuff phoning the police when they find something, but I don't know exactly what. Yeah, I have no legal advice for you.
No, I just call those clients you charge more for.
Yeah, that reminds me of that.
I don't know.
Played Scotty in the new Star Trek. Simon Pegg. It reminds me of a Simon Pegg movie called The Big Nothing.
I don't know if I would get in this business. This sounds like a whole lot of trouble. But I do cover data recovery in that episode of Linux Action Show I mentioned earlier, which is linked in the show notes.
Yeah, it's a bunch of tools.
Specifically, there's a DD Rescue and an improved version of DD Rescue that are really, really great for data recovery.
And then, I've used ERB or something like that, Emergency Rescue Disk for Windows. It has like a Windows PE environment to get data off an NTSS partition before. But that was a long time ago, and I don't really like dealing with that stuff.
This sounds like the type of business where you're probably going to want to have some disclaimers up front. Get people to buy off.
Because a lot of the things you could end up doing with a lot of these tools are destructive to the drive. Yeah. So it's like there's a couple of things you do, and then you draw a line there and you ask the customer, if you want to send this to someone like Drive Savers that's going to get the data back, and it's going to cost like $6,000, but they have a good chance of getting the data back. Or I can proceed down this second line here, doing destructive things to the drive, and I might be able to get your data back, I might not. But if I fail, there's no way for anyone else to try after.
In a spinning disk, just running it can cause potentially more damage.
Especially, yeah, if you're to the point where like a bearing's gone or something, and it's actually like wearing or scratching or something, or if it's just clicking, if it's making a clicking sound, having it turned on is bad.
Bad, right? Now, there's tools like I mentioned, DD Rescue, that they're based around. They work their damnedest to image every sector of that drive, and one of the things DD Rescue does is it works on a sector, works on a sector, works on a sector. Oh crap, I can't get it. I'll remember I couldn't get that. Moves to the next one, works on it, keeps moving. And then once it's moved through every sector, its whole mission is to read that drive as fast as possible because you don't know how long that drive is going to work. It blows through as much as it can, images it all to an image file. Then it starts back on those sectors it couldn't read and tries again, and just keeps narrowing that list of sectors it can't read down and down and down until you have an image file. Then you work from that image file so that way you are not doing anything potentially destructive.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's your workflow. You just got to get really good at that.
Yeah, it's like if you're looking at some point, if it's a file system, whatever, you're going to run FSCK or check disk or something.
Yeah.
Well, that changes the data. And so you never want to do that on the original drive because if it goes bad and makes a mess of it,
you got nothing. You're out.
Then you've overwritten data that you needed now.
Yeah. That's why everybody just needs to back.
And it brings up really interesting questions when you're looking at things like BTRFS or ZFS when you're doing copy on write, is there's multiple copies of stuff. And so you need to try to get a consistent version of the file. Because, this block was from this part of the file at one point. But if, you can't just grab parts of the file from different times and try to stitch it together.
You know what would be a guaranteed moneymaker, Alan? Because as my long experience with clients shows me is they don't generally want to spend money until they're feeling the pain. And the moment that they're feeling the pain, they'll do a lot of things. So what would really work is if like you were data recovery, and then as you're recovering the data, you're like, let me tell you about my backup services. You pay me $15 a month and I'll back up all your data. That's when they're going to buy. So you combine those two things, Joe, and you got yourself a business, I think.
Yeah.
So go check out, but just a brief reminder, go check out season 27, episode 10. We cover those tools as well as the live USB images. And some of those do allow you to modify them so that we don't have to keep flashing it all the time. So you can update your scripts and tools on the USB device. Some good stuff in there. All right, now I think that's all the feedback for this week, right?
It is.
Yeah, okay. So we had a few bit messages that I wasn't able to get to. I apologize, but we have our bit message address in the show notes. You can send them there. You could also start a thread in our subreddit, TechSNAP, or links.techsnap.tv. I like that because I'm lazy, and I don't have to read your email and go paste it into a Slexy document and then go link that in the show notes. If you put it up on Reddit, you've typed it all out for me. It's beautiful. But you can email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or pop that contact link and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down.
And the other nice thing about the Reddit is upvotes let us decide which story people are more interested in, and we get more comments, and
if it's urgent, you might get an answer
clarifications.
Faster.
Right?
Yep.
We can ask for more information.
Yep, absolutely.
But however you want to send your questions, please do.
Yeah.
And the address for BSD Now, we need questions for BSD Now. If you want to send a question, it's feedback@bsdnow.tv.
Feedback@bsdnow.tv. So if you got some good BSD questions, that's where you send them, right?
Yep.
Nice, I like it. All right, Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it in the very top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of times these links are provided by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv or by Alan's pinboard, which you just don't find out until you watch the show. Mwahaha! Alan, our first Roundup brings Kim.com back into the show. It's been too long since we've had a story about Mega and Kim.com, so what's going on with this one? He's looking
a security
dapper.
researcher. Yeah, a security researcher has released an app called Megapone, which is a little JavaScript bookmarklet, which is able to display your private master key for Mega's encryption and your RSA exponent. So basically, it shows that your Mega key and stuff aren't encrypted or anything on your computer. Any Java script that's running on your computer can pull that data out. So it's like, Mega's trying, and technically, if your computer's compromised, then your keys are compromised, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time,
computers get compromised.
A little more effort put into protecting the keys would probably be good. And this comes at a bad time for Mega because they're just announcing a new email service to try to replace LavaBit and Silent Circle, which shut down because of the government.
Yeah. All right. Well, when I think of search, I think of Sergey. I think of Google. I don't know if I think of Jonathan Fletcher.
So it was 20 years ago that the concept of search engine was invented at a university in Scotland.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of a story from BBC there about it, and the university is trying to find a way to celebrate the 20 years, and the fact that, while they invented it, it didn't really become a thing until later.
Right. So Google made it big, but the actual indexing of the web was from this guy. That was his idea.
Originally, the first web crawler was invented in 1993.
20 years ago, in a computer lab at the University of Stirling, right? Is that how you say it? In Scotland? Mr.
Yes. Fletcher
Fletcher was his name.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. The father of the search engine. Sort of, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. We have a clip here from the IT guy, Alan. What do we have here?
Yeah, well, this is actually a video from Intel's partner channel.
Oh.
And it got linked, and I watched it, and it was so bad on purpose that I just had to share it.
Whoa, man, free weasels. Heck yeah. Run that bad dog.
Oh, no.
Oh, make lots of money. Oh, no. Oh, hot time, lonely guy. That's me, man. Big man, bring it on.
Getting a bunch of pop-ups. Oh,
Don't.
and blue screen.
Oh, snap.
Should we play the whole thing? I don't know. It's a little long.
Now he's calling support. Oh, God.
Yeah. But if you skip ahead a little bit, basically they use IPKVM to remote into the machine and run a malware scan, or in this case, they actually boot off a rescue disk instead of off the hard drive.
Basically, what we have here, you'll see down there at the bottom that scan did find the unwanted virus. So we'll just let this quick scan complete, and we'll clean it up from there.
So they are demonstrating the built-in Intel management utility. So they're actually able to reboot that system and boot an alternative operating system remotely.
Yes, and I use something similar to that to install FreeBSD on machines in foreign countries.
Yeah. I actually used an IP. Oh, go ahead.
Some people are wondering how I did some of that stuff, and this kind of shows this is more Office desktop type oriented thing. And they have a thing where a red border shows around the screen when your computer's being remote controlled, so you can tell.
Oh, that's nice.
It's like a privacy feature from Intel, but in general, it gives you an idea of the type of things you can do with these remote KVM systems.
I think I've told the story before, but I once remoted into a IP KVM ran in Java, and it would allow me to use local USB devices on the remote system that was in a different state. And I actually installed, I think it was Windows 2003, from a CD-ROM in my local computer over the internet to a computer in the data center through the IP KVM using that USB device emulation.
I've done that at least a dozen times in the last 30 days.
It's so, well. See,
I did a FreeBSD ISO on my hard drive.
With your fancy high-speed, Alan. This is way back in the day.
Right.
This is like back in 2003.
Some of them that only have a web interface, instead of so they don't have the Java to read the ISO off my hard drive. They can do a Samba share. So I actually have one of my servers has a internet-facing Samba share with share full of FreeBSD install ISOs.
Yeah, I mean, these days, honestly now, most of the times I'm deploying on virtualization, so I have a data store that has all the ISOs on there. It's like totally not relevant anymore, but I remember thinking
virtualization, I hate inside virtualization, so all my stuff is real hardware, so
yeah.
The few times when I don't have the IP KVM, I really, really miss it.
I remember thinking, though, wow, this thing is taking a USB device on my local machine, and it thinks it's a USB device. It was so cool. But as soon as I updated Java, the whole thing broke. It just totally died. So it had its issues. Speaking of VNC and remote login.
Because interestingly, most of those IPKVMs is just a slightly modified version of VNC.
Yeah.
So I'm really wondering if somebody could make this so you could eliminate the Java part of it by having the VNC be JavaScript instead of Java.
So here we go. VNC client on just 200 lines of JavaScript.
Yes. So JavaScript itself can't make a TCP connection directly. So they use a Node.js, which is a server-side JavaScript engine, to do like a proxy. So you make AJAX calls to the Node.js, and it goes out and makes the connection to the server over VNC and actually returns to the JavaScript PNG images of the screen.
Oh, clever.
It also uses the HTML5 canvas thing to draw it all.
Wow, it's actually, the performance is pretty good.
Apparently.
Yeah, I'm watching, there's a video of it in the show notes, and it works pretty good. Well, there you go. That'd be really handy. Very handy. All right, our next story in the roundup, all these links are in the show notes when you want to read more, too. Tor is trying to figure out how to handle millions of new Tor clients, which
Yes,
we've been talking
it's
about a little bit.
an interesting graph where the number of users just goes up.
Yeah, starting around mid-August.
Yeah. They're pretty sure it's a botnet, but at first when it was just a couple of new users, they're like, oh, everybody's interested in Tor now. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's not stopping, and the rate is very steady and stuff. It definitely seems to be a
NSA.
botnet that might be using it for a command and
NSA.
control server.
Oh.
Well, because normally a command and control server is something that researchers would go and get taken down.
Yeah.
But if it's a hidden service in Tor, it's much harder to take it down.
Kind of makes you wonder why it hasn't been done already.
Yeah. Well, partly because Tor is usually too slow and unreliable.
Yeah.
And it's only gotten more so with all these users. So yeah, with all these users, a lot of Tor nodes are having problems with the amount of CPU and stuff. So they've released a newer version of the Tor client, and they are asking people to please upgrade as soon as possible, so that there's a little less traffic to deal with the amount of people on the network. They said, luckily, so far, most of these million new Tor users are not actually connecting out to anything, and so aren't actually using up the traffic on the exit nodes.
Okay. All right, Alan. So now we've got a story here from Network World, an exclusive test story. They say Chinese vendor enters crowded U.S. switch market to deliver excellent power consumption and decent performance. Oahu? Forget how you say
Hawaii?
it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're a Chinese manufacturer, and they've made an enterprise-grade managed switch. And Network World got one, and it's like a 6 or plus page report on all the tests they ran on it and what they did. In particular, there have been a lot of rumors about the security of these Huawei devices. Propaganda saying that because they're Chinese, they're full of backdoors and phone home features and stuff. So in addition to the regular performance tests and stuff they would do on a switch, they also ran a bunch of tests trying to hack into the SSH daemon. The MikroTik thing we just talked about. They actually, Network World used the machine that IX Systems give them to demo FreeNAS, and they used Metasploit on it to try to attack the switch. So they ran a fuzzer against SSH where they tried every single different field and put too much data in it, so it would do a buffer overflow. So they tried all that, and they also ran all the Metasploit SSH attacks that are in the library against it to try to break it, and it was fine. While they can't say that means it's secure, they didn't find any obvious holes in it.
Well, it's funny because now our next two stories, or our next story in the roundup, is an NSA-related story, and we did see all those warnings about Chinese telcos, and you almost wonder if it was like the U.S. projecting a little bit, because in the last week we saw these stories. Wired ran a great one. NSA laughs at PCs, prefers hacking routers and switches, hacks routers and switches by the thousands, Alan. They conducted...
because routers and switches generally don't get Windows updates.
Right. So that we're the ones going after routers and switches. But the actual story for the roundup is the NSA hacks other countries by buying millions of dollars worth of vulnerabilities on the black market. This is something we've talked about a lot.
And the like.
And now, so when you have the U.S. government buying these vulnerabilities on the market, the thing that's going to do is they're buying a lot of them, Alan. They're buying thousands of them. That's going to drive the prices up.
Yep.
And that's going to make these people make more money. It perpetuates a black industry.
More researchers deciding that, I'd rather get $100,000 for this than publish a paper.
Right. I mean, this is going to just up the ante and get more people doing it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking to see if they have any
And it
numbers
also makes you wonder if it was the NSA saying, don't buy these Huawei routers because we haven't got our spyware installed on them.
Do you have a guess as to how much they spent last year on buying black market vulnerabilities? Yeah. $25 million. $25 million. Yeah. That's going to, I mean, they are creating the industry right there. So there you go. All right. Our next story in the roundup comes from the GoDaddy blog, the inside.godaddy.com blog.
It's an interesting article that they were talking about scaling issues they had when they built their own little analytics system for tracking traffic on their website. And it kind of talks about databases and sharding. And basically they used a GUID, which is a long global unique string, as the the cluster key.
Okay.
To how to break up the data into separate files on the system. And because of the way GUIDs work, it resulted in huge amounts of fragmentation.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great post. Look at they got some diagrams
huge
here.
Amount of technical detail, just explaining how database fragmentation works and stuff. So it's not just about a best practice about the specific problem they had, but the whole idea of how database fragmentation affects your performance.
Very nice. I love
or like
it.
how they could do like 8,000 queries per second on this database, but when they did certain types of queries, it would just trash the performance entirely because it would be doing non-sequential reads and jumping all over the place and things like that.
It's an interesting aspect of the industry because a lot of people out there in the IT field are solving problems that probably at some point somebody else has faced, but a lot of companies don't talk about it, either for competitive reasons or secrecy or whatever it is. So it's really nice.
Or,
to see
the system is just too busy to write up a nice thing and make
that too.
artwork for it.
Very much that too, right? Very much that.
Yeah.
All right, this one kind of people hit our subreddit with a heavy heart. My OpenID to shut down in February. This is
Yes, I heard about this earlier when I got an email from them because I've had my OpenID. But the only place I've ever been able to use it was Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, OpenID just really has
they
to
don't
be
even, and Stack Overflow doesn't offer it as a primary option anymore. You have to click twice to have it as a login option because nobody was using it. Yeah, so my OpenID started in 2006, but by 2009 it became obvious to them that it seemed everybody just wanted to use Google or Twitter or Facebook. And that a federated system where people could run their own and, I can understand people's reticence at the same time. It's like, so you're saying to solve the problem of needing a different account at every website, I need another account.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this was, you had a lot more control over it, and there's an open standard, and you could be your own provider.
Yes, that was
or
nice.
You could use anybody who's already a provider and stuff.
So I think Mozilla's got this figured out. Mozilla Persona, that's not the theming support for Firefox. This is their identity login system. And we
and
interviewed,
overloading games and stuff
Right.
makes it difficult.
We interviewed one of the developers from Mozilla Persona on Coder Radio 63. I really think Mozilla. First of all, I think Mozilla is the right organization to do this kind of thing. And I also like that it's open source. I also like that they're allowing for self-hosted solutions like OpenID did, or providers ones. And, people are already starting to embrace it, like our sponsor Ting. You can use Mozilla Persona to log into your Ting account. So it's starting to get some traction, and we had a great chat. So if people are curious about this kind of thing, and maybe Mozilla's Persona will replace OpenID, you can go listen to Coder Radio 63. Yeah. You got a story in the roundup that's making me want to buy a processor. What's this about, Alan? A little i7 review over on the hothardware.com.
Yeah, although it's a little weird, honestly.
Oh, yeah? So is that why it's in the roundup?
Kind of, yes.
Okay.
So Intel launched the new i7-4690X Extreme Edition processor.
Extreme!
The weird thing is that every other i7 that starts with the 4 is the new Haswell ones. But these are an extended version of the Ivy Bridge. So they should actually start with a 3. But it's faster, so they give it the higher number so that it would sell as not being previous generation. But it really messes everything up when you end up with the model number doesn't tell you what microarchitecture it is anymore.
But it's going to work in Ivy Bridge systems.
Yes, I think so. It uses, I'm not familiar with all the sockets anymore.
LGA 2011.
2011, yeah.
2011.
So it's an i7-4690X. It's 6 cores with hyperthreading, so 12 execution threads in total. Default speed is 3.6 gigahertz with a turbo of up to 4 gigahertz. And it's the unlocked one, so it can be overclocked. Hot Hardware had it up to 4.6 gigahertz.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's the fastest processor that's ever been created so far. As far as if you have a multi-threaded workload, 6 cores at 4 gigahertz is a lot of speed.
That would be great for encoding.
Yeah. However, the regular Haswell ones, the i7-4000s that aren't these one particular exception, they have better speed for single-threaded applications. So the speed you can get out of one core at the same processor speed is better. So the Haswells can do more work in the same gigahertz on one core than the Ivy Bridges can.
Right.
But because these i7, the Extreme Edition Ivy Bridges are 6 cores and are so many gigahertz, they're faster if your load is multi-threaded.
Heaven's Revenge in the chat room says is using their larger Xeon socket.
Yeah.
So, I want one. I want one real bad. I want one.
Yeah, although I was thinking, the Hot Hardware review talks about which use cases are different for each.
Yeah.
For video encoding, I'm not sure if the Haswells or if the Extreme Edition will be better.
Oh, maybe the Haswells would if they're doing more work per cycle.
Yeah.
All right, so
but they're not as many gigahertz in the end, and I don't know if all of them are as many cores. So
more cores is better.
If your load is actually spread out, yes. Most video encoding is multi-core now, but some of it isn't.
Yeah.
So if your workload is single core, then a Haswell is probably better.
So for WebM, single core, and for all of the good codecs like X264, multi-core.
Yeah. The multi-core stuff, the Extreme Edition should be better because it has the 2 extra cores. Eventually, I imagine we'll see Haswell Extreme Editions, but they're probably a little ways down the road.
Yeah. All right. So our next story takes us back to the NSA and Snowden and counterintelligence. What's going on, Alan?
So this is a story by a counterintelligence agency making the case about some of the stuff with Snowden and some just his random thoughts, really. But he actually makes the case that Snowden was working for Russia the entire time.
I've heard that theory kicked around.
And it was kind of dismissed out of hand early on, and then now, all of a sudden we find out that even when he was in Hong Kong, he was with the Russians and so on.
You never know. We just have to sit back and watch it unfold, I suppose.
Yep. But it's just somebody's random thoughts, and it came up in my newsfeed, so I threw it in the bottom of the roundup.
There you go. Well, if you guys want to read that, you can. We have everything we talked about, all the stories linked in the show notes. All right, Alan, I think that brings us to the end of this week's show, doesn't it?
Yep.
All right, so here's a few details. Essentials. You can join us live. We love when you join us live because we've got a great chat room. And in between the segments, we hang out, we talk with these guys, talk about spiders, talk about video games. And you can join us.
I remember the spiders last night.
Yeah. You can join us at jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Yep, and also the audio stream should be working now, so you can go over to jblive.info.
I saw in the chat room somebody saying it was, yes.
Yep. And we have a 128 kilobit stream for your desktop and a mobile stream that's below 64 kilobits. And that works good over a 3G connection if you're in the car and want to listen while you drive. You just put jblive.info in your smartphone and tap it, and it should just load right up in your browser or your player of choice. And don't forget to email us, TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right, Alan, we'll have a great week.
Yes, you too.
Show. All right, everyone, well, thank you for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.